If I look like I've been through some things, it's because I have. I may have just met the biggest adversary. Adversary? I mean, I love it, but I guess we're saying adversary in my garden that I have ever come across. So this is picking up on a video I kind of left hanging last week when I was planting onions and strawberries in the vegetable garden. And I was intending to include this project as part of that. Thank God I didn't, because I think I have 4 hours into this now and have just finally made some reasonable progress. So let me start with last week when I was optimistic and all things were possible. Welcome to some of my favorite clematis that I have in the yard. This is Little Bas. There are 2 of them. They grow in 24-inch square containers on either side of my garden gate. So these clematis are doing great. But one of the problems that has happened is that over the years, if I pull some of these leaves away, you will see that the soil level has dropped to probably 8 inches below the rim of these planters. Now, that bothers me because it makes it difficult to plant annuals in there because you have to get something tall enough to sort of come over the top. In addition to that, these clematis have been in here for quite some time. I think these were planted in 2020. I put these containers in this garden, I think in 2019. We tried roses in here for a year. Did not work. Well, it worked until it didn't, which is how roses go for me. So I planted these clematis in here. So let's say 2020. These have done so well here. But my concern with these is the 2 things. Well, one, I'd like to lift that soil level. And this is a group 3 clematis, so this is not the kind that tolerates its roots or its stems being buried as well as others. So when I plant a group 2 clematis, which are the early large flowering ones, for those, I absolutely plant those, 4 to 7 inches deep, usually at an angle, because what that does is it encourages new stems to come up from underground, which is really important because that type of clematis is susceptible to clematis wilt. And sometimes you'll lose entire chunks of the plant with clematis wilt, but when you have new stems coming up from below, that helps. Same thing goes for if you've got like a rabbit problem and they nip off stems. There's usually stems waiting to push out there. Now, my understanding is that this group 3 clematis type, which is mostly what I grow these days, is less interested in being buried deeply. So I would like to get this raised higher rather than just put more dirt on top, soil. But on top of that, I also feel like I'm a little worried that these clematis have used up what is good in this soil, and I feel like refreshing the soil would be a really good thing for them. So my thought is to dig these out, pull them out, and then replant them in fresh soil. Let me just show you where we're at though. So I've pruned these already, and you can see they've got nice big buds. And by the way, you can say clematis, you can say clematis, you say whatever you want, doesn't matter. A lot of the advice you will hear about a group 3 type is to basically cut it 6 inches from the ground. I do different pruning for different reasons. And in this case, I want it to go over this arbor, which is no problem, honestly. What you see up there is the dead stems from last year. They've all been pruned off, but I have to get a ladder to pull them off of there. Plus, since I plant annuals in these containers, it's no big deal if there's some ugly stems because those get covered up by the annuals. So I tend to prune them a little bit higher to a really fat, nice bud. So this clematis was putting up a big fight, so I decided to flip the planter on its side. Now, first of all, when we flipped this over, look what we found. There are roots coming out of the seams here. And clematis roots are really easy to spot because they are bright yellow. Now, when we come around to this side, you will see this. So this is I think a 24-inch square planter, and everything you see here, all of this is just a mass of clematis roots. The roots are coming out the bottom, even though there's not a lot of holes for it to come out the bottom. It's huge. It is a mass of roots in there. and it's so jammed in there that I cannot pull this root ball out. And I'm worried that if I tug and pull too much, I'm either gonna hurt the plant or I'm gonna break the planter box, which I don't wanna do, or break my back. What I was thinking I could do was maybe just pull it up instead of pulling it out and then slip some dirt down the side. Doesn't seem to be in the cards. I'm gonna give it one last shot here and see what happens. You know when you hit that point in a project where you say, yeah, this isn't meant to be. This project isn't meant to be. So after I left things where they were last week, I actually reached out to Dan Long, who owns Brushwood Nursery, who sold me these clematis and probably 30 more. I'm a pretty good customer. But this is, so just the fact that I could reach out to Dan, a clematis expert, and get help pretty quickly, I think reinforces just briefly, I want to go into the importance of these small specialist nurseries. These people know everything there is to know, or as much as anybody else knows, about the plant that they specialize in or plants that they specialize in. And they have knowledge that people can tap into. So it's one of many reasons why I really advocate supporting these small specialist nurseries, because this is the kind of help you get. Anyway, I emailed Dan and I told him what was going on, and he emailed back what I kind of thought in the back of my head, but I was sort of looking for a reason to not have to do this. He said, you gotta get those plants out of those pots. You have to refresh that soil. And he just said, get as big of a root ball as you can. Don't worry about it. They're super tough. This one in particular, Little Bas, is particularly tough. So I came out here armed with several tools. Let me show you what I'm using. Tool number one, the bread knife. How many times have I brought this? To be clear, this is our actual bread knife. I will take this in and run this in the dishwasher, and we will use this to cut bread. Perhaps I use it so often that I should just hang on, there's a plant. See, look, that was helpful. There was some vine hanging in the way there. Anyway, maybe I should get a dedicated one for gardening, but it sure comes in handy a lot. I've also been using a hori-hori. I've been using my hands, which are aching right now. They're gonna hurt a lot tonight. And I have been using this fun little sneebor tool, which we wouldn't think has so many applications. It's just like a skinny little knife. You slide it along the edges of a pot to help loosen it. Then I brought out Mr. Much More Patient twice now in this process. And let me show you what's happened on only one of them so far. We got a root ball out. Look at that thing. I'll show you the inside of the pot, but in the meantime, this whole wheelbarrow is full of the roots. You can see this is the corners. They really were hanging out in the corners. I mean, this is all just masses of roots. Now, when I originally planted this, I put insulation board on the sides and the bottom with big holes popped in the bottom for drainage. My intention was two things. One, to add a little bit of insulation to these pots, but mostly to protect these kind of cheap wood pots so that there wasn't soil to pot contact. Apparently, at the bottom, I put in landscape fabric. And I think this is what's causing the problem, because the roots, this is what happens how many times have we talked about hating landscape fabric? Well, the roots have all grown through the landscape fabric. I think I did that because there was big holes at the bottom. I didn't want the soil falling through. Okay, that was the culprit. This is the underside of that landscape fabric. So you guys, when you think about using landscape fabric, this is what happens. It makes it impossible to pull the weeds that do happen, and impossible to pull out your clematis. So yeah, so all that soil is stuck on there because those roots are just embedded in that land. And this is pretty high quality landscape fabric. This is not cheap stuff. Okay, so the bottom of these planters are slats. That's why I did the foam board insulation on the bottom. And there is drip irrigation that runs along the back of these. Let me get you on the other side of the gate here. Along the back of these. Now, I don't know that I've ever run drip to these boxwoods, but there is drip irrigation that tees off the drip irrigation that runs down the side beds in the garden. There are only two places in this garden where I use drip irrigation. One is the front. Oh my gosh, sorry guys. I think there might be dirt here too. One is along the front border, skinny border, where it's all annuals. It's less than 2 feet wide, and it's facing south. It needs water all the time, and that's been a real lifesaver. I then run water up to my hanging window box from there, and then here in the vegetable garden, which is great because I would never be able to keep up with giving consistent water to these things. And as long as I have it out here, I connected it to these two pots, so I wouldn't have to worry about that. Here's the little supply line that I had to cut to get these up. This is just 1/4 inch supply line underneath there so that I can connect that at a time and place of my choosing. And then I'm going to run this through. Let's get you down here. Run this through a slat at the back here, I think. Is that where I did it? I think maybe I ran it up through a drain hole here. That's a drain hole that I had created through the foam board. Now I'm going to put the foam back in because I think this foam board idea was really, really good. I think it worked absolutely great. Okay, here's the next thing. Coffee filters. I'm going to cover those holes with coffee filters. This is only so that the loose soil doesn't come out when I'm adding soil to this pot, because obviously that soil will get, clumped up pretty quickly. So by the time these degrade, it won't be a problem. Now it's just a matter of basically planting this clematis exactly how I would plant any other clematis in a pot. So I'm going to use a mix of really good potting soil. So I'm going to use, you guys know I like Organic Mechanics. I'm going to use some of their premium blend potting soil, which I like to use for trees and shrubs, things that are going to be in a pot for a long time. I'm going to use some compost in there. I'm also going to use some biochar blend, also from Organic Mechanics. They sent me that stuff, which was nice of them. And maybe, not maybe, for sure, let me get it, some worm castings. Remember, clematis like really nice, rich soil that is very good draining. Just a little bit of bone meal. I don't see that recommended a lot anymore when planting clematis, but when I first got into clematis, the advice was to throw in a handful of bone meal and mix it in with the planting soil. I don't think it hurts, and I think it helps. So I still do that. So I'm going to mix that all up, put that in, and we are close to being done with this. All right, it's done. It ranks right up there with the most difficult garden jobs I've ever done that involve a plant. Hauling is worse, but that was a challenge. So I mixed in probably, I'm just trying to guess what my ratios were. Maybe 15%, not even. 15% compost, mostly potting mix. The general rule of thumb with the biochar is that you don't want more than 10% in a container. So 10% that, and like a handful of worm castings, bone meal. And then I did put some Espoma rose tone. That is what I fertilize all my clematis with. So I just kind of mixed that in sort of at that top layer, watered it in really well. I think you saw that I probably ended up with it a little on the high side. I think there was more roots on the top because it was getting so low and there was a lot of mulch and soil building up on top of it. It's going to be much happier in this case. The very sad thing about this situation is that I still have one more to do. I think the lesson here, never, ever, ever, ever put landscape fabric anywhere, because it screwed me on this one too. So I don't think that would have been as hard if that landscape fabric weren't at the bottom, because I think the whole thing would have slid out. And plan on like 6 hours per pot. I don't know where I'm at on this project, but I can't believe there's one more to do. Anyway, I will keep you abreast of the situation and how these grow this year. Hopefully we have no problems whatsoever, but you will see along with me how this works out. Thanks for following along on this saga. Please send Advil. Have a great day in your garden. Bye. The second one came up much better because now I knew what to expect. I knew that the landscape fabric was what was keeping it in there, so we were able to sort of rock the root ball, and I was able to cut underneath it. And you got to see the bottom of this root ball. What we did was we pulled up the landscape fabric that was lining the bottom and just flipped the whole thing over. And holy smokes, you got to see this. So this is the bottom of the pot. And I've ripped off the landscape fabric, but this, you guys, 4 years, one clematis, 4 years in a 24-inch cube pot. Holy smokes.